This is the Amazing Teacher Podcast with Sam Rangel, episode number 1.
Welcome to the Amazing Teacher Podcast, where we sit down with amazing teachers and pick their brains for tips, strategies, and ideas that you can take into your classroom and be amazing. Now, here's your host, Sam Rangel.
Welcome, amazing teachers, to the very first episode of the Amazing Teacher Podcast. Again, my name is Sam from successintheclassroom.com, and I just want to thank you for taking the time out to listen to the podcast, whatever you're doing, if you're in the car listening to this, or you're jogging, or you're just kicking back at home. I want to thank you. It means a lot that you are willing to give up some of your time just to listen to the podcast. I know you're going to find great value in the podcast, just listening to these amazing teachers share what they do in the classroom. So real quick, I want to tell you a little bit about the background of this podcast, where it came from. I was sitting with an amazing teacher at my school, and she was just telling me of all the great things she does in class. She was telling me her ideas for classroom management, and I was thinking, this is awesome stuff. I wish I could just bottle it and give it to new teachers and new soon-to-be teachers so that they can take it into the classroom and implement these amazing practices. But there really isn't a system in place to share what these amazing teachers are doing with new teachers. It's just not, they're just not an effective system to get that done. So that's where the podcast idea came in. I thought, I'm going to find amazing teachers, I'm going to sit down with them, and I'm going to pick their brains, and I'm going to share that with anybody who is willing to listen. And I think new teachers and soon-to-be teachers would be the perfect audience for this podcast, especially if they want to be amazing in the classroom. And I think every new teacher has that goal of being that amazing teacher. But a lot of times those first years are filled with just trying to survive and just trying to make it through the year, learning and trying to manage the class. They just don't have the time to be amazing. That's where the podcast hopefully will be able to help them out. They can, on the way to work, they can listen to these amazing teachers and their ideas, and they can implement it in their classrooms and have that head start in their careers. So I'm so excited about my very first guest. She is a teacher that I've been following for some time online. Her name is Pernille Ripp. Pernille Ripp, and she has a blog called Blogging Through the Fourth Dimension, and she describes herself as a passionate fifth grade teacher, a techie geek, a mass consumer of incredible books, and what's really amazed me, she is the creator of the Global Read Aloud project, and she's going to talk a little bit about that in the podcast. And she just recently won an award for her blog, and I am so excited about having her on the show. I sent her an email, and she said yes. So I'm really grateful that she agreed to be on the podcast. So here is the interview with Pernille. Ready? Here we go. Today I'm so happy to have Pernille Ripp from Blogging to the Fourth Dimension on the podcast. Welcome to the show, Pernille.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I know you've been sharing your expertise with teachers online for a while now. In fact, you were one of the ones that I read and that inspired me to start a blog for teachers. So I'm really grateful that you're able to come on and sit down and let me pick your brain about teaching.
Sure. I didn't know that because you're someone's blog who I really enjoy reading, so I didn't know that there was a connection like that between us. Helpful.
Oh, thanks. Well, before we begin, can you share with the listeners what exactly is the fourth dimension?
Well, it used to be in relation to me being a fourth grade teacher, and I switched after blogging about it for a year. I switched to fifth grade, and I didn't feel like switching the title of my blog then. So at the time it started, it made perfect sense, and now it's just stuck, and I felt stupid switching it to the fifth dimension or something like that. So I guess it's a good lesson to kind of beware of what you title your blog. Make sure it's maybe a little more universal, because I started out on Twitter as fourth grade teach as well and realized that I had to change that too. So that's the fourth dimension. I've been trying to come up with some incredibly deep meaning behind it, but unfortunately there isn't one.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because I thought there's got to be some kind of really deep insight to this fourth dimension.
Oh.
All right. All right. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into teaching and blogging, and just a little bit about your journey that has taken you to where you are today?
Sure. Well, I grew up knowing I never wanted to be a teacher because my whole family was teachers, and I thought it sounded terrible. And so when I moved to America in '98, I was 18 and didn't quite know what to do. I was undecided in college, dropped out, and really didn't know what I wanted to do, and just worked full-time for 3 years trying to kind of find myself. And it wasn't until I met my husband who looked at me, or he wasn't my husband at the time, but my husband now, and he said, you know, what are you going to do with your life? And it kind of struck me that maybe the one thing I'd been running from all these years was really what I wanted to do. And I said, well, I want to be a teacher. And so that was the moment of truth for me, and I focused all of my energy into working full-time and going to school full-time at the same time, and just trying to get it done. And I was lucky enough that I got connected to my school right away. I was a practicum student at my school, and I then became a student teacher at my school and ended up doing a maternity leave at my school, and then was offered a job. And it was really a school that I so passionately wanted to work at because of the incredible community that there was, both among the students but also among the teachers and the families. And also the diverse population we had really appealed to me. And so I started teaching pretty much like every teacher does, the traditional way, the way I was taught in college and the way I thought teachers should teach. And after 2 years in 4th grade, I realized that I did not want to be a student in my own classroom, and I wanted to quit teaching. I was so burned out, and it wasn't the students' fault. I had great students, I had great families, and a great district. I just hated the way I had become. And I went home and spoke to my husband, Brandon, about it, like I always do about everything. And instead of going, oh, well, you should quit, he said, well, how are you going to change it? And I decided that that was really my point, to say I need to create a classroom that I'd want to be in, and not me now, but me as a kid. And and that was important to me. And so I threw everything out, which maybe wasn't the smartest thing, but I didn't know really what else to do. And I decided to get rid of punishment and rewards and homework and grades, and really try to give the classroom back to the students and give them back their education. And so my husband also said, well, why don't you blog about it? Maybe it'll be good for you just to be reflective and get your thoughts out, because there was so much going on in my head. And I did, and I didn't think anyone would read it, which I think is how most people start.
Right.
But it really just started as kind of this honest reflection of what am I about to do, and how scared I was, and why I was doing it. And that's kind of what my blog still is today. I'm very honest. I put it all out there. I don't hide the bad. In teaching, for me, I have to reflect through my mistakes and my failures, and it has created lots of powerful learning moments for me where others have shared their inspiration. So that was 3 years ago, and I've been going strong since then, and it's been quite the journey, and an exciting journey for me, and it's something that I'm very passionate about now. I don't think I have a method. I don't think I have a program. I just think I have something that works for me, and I'm willing to share that with anybody who wants to hear about it.
That's why so many teachers connect with you, because they see your honesty, they see your transparency, and you know that they're going through that same kind of conflict in their lives, because they're following what they've been taught. They're following what other teachers have told them to do. It's not necessarily the best thing for them, and it's easy, like you said, after 2 years of getting burnt out. That seems to be a very common among new teachers. 3 years is the range where teachers start leaving the profession. Yeah. And so what you did, I think, is inspiring, because you did what your husband told you. How are you going to change it? And you took action on that. And I think that is what new teachers, if they're feeling like you, a little burnt out, how are you going to change it? What are you going to do? My question is, how did your administration feel about you making such drastic changes like homework and grades and stuff like that?
They were very supportive. I was also very open, and I brought research to them saying this is what I'm going to try. And I explained it to them why, and promised them that I would still hold my students to the same educational standards that we have that are incredibly high in our district. And I told them that I would absolutely do it as kind of a trial thing, and that I needed to do this for myself. And they put their trust in me, and I'm so thankful for that. And, you know, there were still rules I had to abide by. I still had to do report cards, so there had to be grades on that. And that was fine because it gave me a way to work around and work with a system that most of us are under anyway. So I work in a public school, and we have standards, and we have the same restrictions that a lot of public schools have. And so I had to find a way within the system to make it work. And the homework thing, my principal completely understood. He knew that I was still asking kids to read outside of school, but he just knew that we were really going to cover the same stuff in different ways, or with me talking less within the classroom. And I'm sure they too were thinking, oh my, what is she going to do? But I think it showed their hopes and dreams, and also just belief in me, that they were willing to stick out their neck and say, you know what, we're going to let you try this, and then we're going to see how it goes and evaluate it. And they knew too that I was going to keep parents intimately involved in the process, and then I'd be getting the feedback from parents too. And so I think for anyone looking to change, I think the first step is to include your administration and really be open about it. I didn't know what they were going to say. I certainly had dreams and hopes, but I think if I tried to do it under the radar, it could have been very disrespectful, and that was never my intent.
Right.
And so I think it's always important to make sure that administration does know the big things that you're doing, and that you have an honest and open conversation with them about why. I think sometimes we tend to think that administration is closed off to new ideas, and from my experiences, that's simply not true. It just depends on the conversation that you start with them.
Now, you mentioned communication with parents, because I can see parents saying, "Why does my kid not have any homework?" And why is my kid not coming home with stuff to do at home? So you mentioned communication with parents. Yeah. Was that a big element in your journey there?
Oh yeah, and it still is. I mean, because every year we start fresh with a new set of parents. Now my reputation kind of supersedes me, which helps a little bit. But I remember that first night of the parent meeting and thinking, oh my, I'm about to put it all on the line, and how are they going to react? And I thought that I didn't know what to expect, and I was terrified because I knew that this was going to be important for parent support. Or to have parent support with. And honestly, most of them were really relieved because they saw what these hours of homework were doing to their fourth graders at the time, and how it was turning them off from school. I still had parents that wanted to make sure that their kids were learning the same stuff that they were learning in the other rooms. And quickly, as we got the year started, they realized that they were. And then they started telling me, too, that their kids were coming home actually excited about school and had energy to be with the family. And every year, or almost every year, I've had parents say, I'd really like more work for my child because we're working on this and this at home. And I'm always open to that, and we always find a way to do it. Again, flexibility, and then just being really open and inviting the conversations at conferences or any time. I always ask them, how's everything going? How do you feel about the educational philosophy? I survey my parents throughout the year as well. We can't stick our head in the sand and then assume that everything is fine because nobody's telling us anything. I think it's important that we say, I value your feedback, and I'm going to ask you questions because I'm growing as a learner. And even though sometimes those answers are hard to get, that's how we grow as teachers. And parents are just as important as the kids, and we have to have that relationship with them from the beginning.
Right, and I found that most parents want to get involved with their child's education. Most parents are interested in helping their child at home, but the communication between the teacher and the parent sometimes is missing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where teachers sometimes get a bad reputation, because parents start talking, this teacher, I don't know anything about him, I don't know anything about her, because the teacher hasn't made the effort to connect with the parents. So I think any new teachers out there, that's got to be one of the primary goals of your year, to connect with all your parents, just so that they know you and they know what you're all about. And
I'm terrible at it. I'm pretty shy, and it's hard for me to pick up the phone and call someone or Email is, obviously always a lot easier, but it's hard for me to make that first contact, but I know that it's part of my job. And I think that we just have to make it a priority and make it a priority. As my principal once taught me, that first contact should be a positive one. It shouldn't be anything negative, and it better be pretty quickly within the beginning of school to really start the year off right, and I think that's so true.
That's a great quote to just put in every new teacher's room. First contact should be a positive one, because a lot of times you're hearing from the teacher the first time when your kid's in trouble.
Exactly.
And that's a bad way to start a dialogue.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about, I was reading your blog, the Global Read Aloud project. What is that?
Sure. That was just another crazy idea that started from a conversation between my husband and I as well. He is quite the figure in my educational life, even though he's not a teacher, but that's why we marry good people. We got the idea actually from NPR and listening to them speak about the One Book, One World project that was happening with Neil Gaiman's American Gods. And it was very simple. It was all these people reading American Gods at the same time and using Twitter and using a hashtag to connect. And I said to my husband, how cool would that be to do with kids? And he said, why don't you do it? And it actually started the same year that I started blogging and that I threw out everything. So it was kind of part of that journey. And I didn't know what I was doing. I just had this idea of how about we pick a book and then we read it at the same time and then we use technology to connect the world. And so that first year, I believe we had about 600 students that all read The Little Prince and put their faith in me. Their teachers put their faith in me, and we Skyped and did some other stuff on our wiki. And then the strangers kind of came in and said, can't we try this? Can't we do this? And we're going to do it again, aren't we? And it grew every year, and this is the 4th year for it. And just this morning I checked our numbers, and this year we have 117,000 students signed up globally. Yeah, talk about not thinking that was going to happen. So we have four kind of grade levels or books for people, and there's a French version as well, run by Francois Bourdon, a friend of mine, and we're talking about getting a Spanish version of. But the idea is still very simple. Connect the world one book at a time. Really make students understand that they share so much with kids around the world. And really, through the intimacy of a read aloud, they can really connect with kids all around the world and have the same shared experience, which then opens up dialogue and empathy for other children. Wow. And I was just talking to my students about it today, and they had all these great questions, and I was showing them where different people are, and they couldn't believe it, and they're so excited, and they said, are we going to blog? Are we going to blog about our predictions? Can we do that now? We know it doesn't start until Monday. And I said, yeah, we can, and so they get it. They're excited. Yeah. And they love a good read aloud. So.
What a great movement, a great way to just connect the world.
Exactly.
I mean, you're connecting the world, and I think that's amazing, Pernille. That's just something that you should be very, very proud of.
Well, it's just my idea, but it's everybody else that makes it what it is. I mean, it's all these teachers that put their trust in the project and then really make it their own, and I'm so grateful for them doing that, because if it was just me and my idea, it wouldn't be a very good project.
Well, it's got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
You're doing a lot of great things for teachers now around the world. So congratulations on all your success.
Thank you.
I know that in your career you've met a lot of other amazing teachers.
Yes.
And what can you tell me are some of the qualities or characteristics that are common among amazing teachers?
I think one of the first ones I always notice is passion. And whether it's passion for themselves as learners and protectiveness of themselves as learners, but it's also passion for their students and truly believing that all students can learn, and we just have to figure out the way. When I think about some of the colleagues that I get to work with every single day at my school, I'm blown away by the passion that they bring and the deep care they have for not just their kids in their classroom, but the whole school. Mm-hmm. And so usually anybody I think of as amazing has this kind of deep-seated passion for what they do, and you can't fake it.
Right.
It can burn out of you, but you can't fake it. So that's definitely something that came to mind. And then I think that continually learning as well, and realizing that as teachers, even if we're old teachers, and I'm definitely not an old teacher, but a veteran, that there's still so much to learn because the world changes every day. I think about some of my colleagues, again, both here in Middleton and also globally, that have been teaching for 20, 25, 30 years, and they're still out there, coming in with new ideas, changing, pushing themselves, and I think that's an amazing quality. And then for me, I mean, something that I am drawn to is just any teacher that gives their students a voice. That's kind of my big thing, if I have a thing, I guess. It's just teachers that trust their students to have a voice in the classroom, that perhaps let them decide the rules or somehow let them get engaged in their own education, asking the students what do they want to learn, how do they learn best, etc. I think that's also a quality of an amazing teacher. Sometimes that's hard with the systems that we're put under, but I think there's a way to always have students engaged in their education rather than just having them as passive participants. Which sounds kind of like an oxymoron, but really where education is just being done to them. So for amazing teachers, they have to realize that it's not just them, and that was something I had to realize, that it wasn't about me, it was about the kids. And I see that in the amazing teachers that I work with every day, and both here and around the world.
And you mentioned belief that all students can learn, passion for students, and then trusting students. Sounds like just a sincere concern or sincere belief in kids.
Exactly.
You're right. You're right. Amazing teachers have those qualities. And my goal with this podcast is to hopefully inspire some of these new teachers to learn from you and other amazing teachers and accept some of these qualities as their own, adopt them as their own so that they can in the classroom be amazing as well.
Yeah. And on that, may I add one more quality? Because it's the thing I had to learn, and it's confidence. And not just confidence in yourself, thinking that you can do it, but also confidence enough to prove or to admit when you're wrong. And I think for new teachers, it's hard to come in with confidence, and it's hard enough to have confidence to say to your kids, what do you want to do, because we think we have to be the boss. Mm-hmm. But then I think also the confidence to say to your kids or to whomever or to yourself to say, I need to change this. And I think that's something I've had to learn, that it's okay to say, I screwed up and I'm going to fix it. And that's hard as new teachers, because I know I still feel to this day that everything I need to do has to be perfect because I should know everything. And it's just, that's not how it is.
That's so true, so true. Many teachers are they're perfectionists, just by nature, and to admit that we're not perfect is tough. It's tough. Many new teachers, and even some veteran teachers, struggle with classroom management. And I think of all the blog posts that I have on my site, the classroom management ones are the ones that get the most visits.
Yeah.
What would you say are maybe the top three or four tips that you could give a new teacher struggling with classroom management?
Well, this is where people always think I'm totally crazy. And I probably would have my first year too. So my first one is get rid of punishment. I think so often we are so, under the belief that classroom management equals punishment. And it just doesn't. And I realized 2 years in that I could tell you, beginning of the day, which kid was going to get punished before I had even punished them. Which kid was going to have a check mark, which kid was going to have a yellow or a red, or which kid was going to be wherever I had decided that their public punishment was going to take place. When I got rid of punishment, I all of a sudden had to figure out a way to get the kids to understand how to act in a classroom without having a threat hanging over their head. And it meant that this kind of divide between the kids stopped existing, because the kids look at us and see how we treat other students. And if they're picking up from us that a kid is naughty because they're constantly getting in trouble, or a kid is on the red because they were shouting out or because they were doing whatever, that's how they're going to label that kid too. And all of a sudden you have the bad kids and the good kids. And I realized I was punishing kids into acting the way I wanted them at that moment, but it wasn't teaching them anything at all, other than, there's a consequence, and then I'll deal with that, but the behavior never changed. Once I got rid of punishment, I also needed to get rid of reward, because just like punishment singles out the bad kids, rewards was always singling out the same kids. And again, it was creating this divide between the students of good kids, bad kids. And I also realized that the kids I was rewarding were the kids that probably already were getting rewards in other ways, and that the biggest reward I could give all the kids was really my time. Whether it's time for them just to relax or to read or to be a community, or time like having lunch with me, which I wouldn't think is that exciting, but some of the kids really like, or let's read an extra book, or let's do a challenge or something like that. So as crazy as it sounds to get rid of punishment and rewards, what it led me to realize with classroom management was that because I didn't have that bridge to go across, or that divide, I could take the time to get to know the students instead. And so the way I start my classroom every year now is I talk to the kids that first day of school, and I say, so now's the time I should be telling you the rules, right? And the kids go, yeah. And I said, well, guess what? You already know how to go to school, don't you? And I teach fifth grade now, and they're like, oh, yeah. And I said, good, tell me all the rules of school. And they will. They'll tell you all the rules of school. And then I'll tell them, well, what rules do you want? What do you want our learning community to look like? And they end up talking in their groups and then talking as a big group about their classroom. We don't write them down. We don't sign them. We don't do anything. It's just acknowledging that the kids already know how to do school. Now, I don't have a perfect class. I have kids that will do crazy stuff, just like in any other public school. And those kids are dealt with on a day-by-day basis and an individual basis. If we need to call home, then I tell them, you know what, it's time to call your parents, and they make the phone call. I rarely ever send kids to the principal's office because it usually doesn't need to go there. We really try to make learning a privilege in my room, and the kids tend to want to be part of that. And then I realized, too, that if you have that kid that's blurting out or can't sit still, let them move around. I mean, I think we try to control so many things in our room with classroom management that if you start giving the control back to the students a little bit, you'll stop having those kids that drive us crazy all the time.
Wow. I got to tell you, that is revolutionary.
No, it's crazy, but it works. Most of the time.
And that's the thing. If it works, then we need to adopt it. I don't know if that would work in my classroom. I taught 8th graders, and they're a little bit more. They're another species sometimes.
They can be, absolutely.
And it was rare for me to send students to the office too, but I found that there had to be some kind of threat. And the more I hear you talking, maybe it's time to reconsider that. On my blog, I give new teachers strategies on how to implement rules and how to offer consequences. And maybe it's time to reevaluate that, especially if it's working.
I know, but it's working in a 5th grade classroom. And so I always kind of asterisk my own advice posts because I can only say what has worked for me with my kids. I have had a very diverse population. I have not had, because one year one person was like, well, I'm sure you've just had really nice, well-behaved children. And I was like, well, not really. But my classroom, I mean, it's not going to be like everybody else's classroom. And I've never taught middle school, and I gladly admit that. I think that they can be a completely different species. I think that my main point, though, is have the kids set the rules. I ask my kids, what should we do if someone does stuff? And they'll have a very frank discussion about it. And they actually come up with, like, really harsh punishment.
Right.
And then, we kind of talk about, well, is that even necessary? And it's been really interesting this year. I don't really think we've had anything. I've had to have private conversations with people, which I'll gladly do. I'll pull them into the hallway, and we'll talk about what's going on. 90% of the time, the kids open up to me about what's really going on and why they're acting the way they are, and I realize it has nothing to do with what we're doing. When we have, like, angry students, really angry students, where they come to us with the whole world on their back, it's so important for us to be the place that they can find some kind of comfort, even though they will probably continue to fight us the hardest.
Right.
And I think that's where it's hard for us as teachers to not just dole out punishment and say, well, you do this, but where we have to think about it as, well, they're obviously reacting to something, and what is it they're reacting to, and can I be that place of safety or comfort or whatever it is they need. But it's hard. I mean, and I struggle with it every year. There's definitely moments where I would rather go, you know what, go to the principal's office or, go sit in the corner or whatever you can think of. But I don't know. I guess you just have to stick with it.
I think amazing teachers will ask that question. Is there something else going on that's causing this behavior?
Yeah.
Yeah. They won't jump to the conclusion that, well, this kid's a bad kid.
Yeah.
So that's good. Anything else that you want to share as far as a tip for teachers?
Something easy to do is I told my kids that during work time, which is like 70% of our day, they can work wherever they want in the classroom as long as they're not bugging other people. And that stopped a lot of bugging each other, and it stopped a lot of kids being really restless or a lot of kids not doing what they were supposed to, simply because we were honoring that some kids like lying on the floor, some kids like walking when they are working or whatever. And for me, you always laugh because you're like, oh, my room is full of students with ADHD. Well, I implemented that rule, and I was like, no, they're just kids that don't like to sit in really uncomfortable desks. And so that's always been a really easy tip for me, is to, let them work wherever. And I don't have a lot of, great spots. You see a lot of classrooms that are really cozy. We can't do that as much in my classroom. But the kids spread out, and they get their space, and they figure out where they work best. And I think that's something easy to do for classroom management, because it automatically just refocuses and recenters the kids. And, again, gives them a little bit of autonomy about how they are learning.
Right. And, again, you're trusting them with their education. I trust you to sit where you want as long as you get it done.
Yeah.
As long as you're not bothering anybody else, I trust you. And that's an awesome message to send to kids, especially those who might be a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
So here's the scenario. I'll give you the scenario, because I know a lot of teachers might be placed into this scenario. The school year has already started. The class you have been given has had 3 different substitutes. So the students are a little unstructured. What would you do within the first week to get that class back on track and back to learning?
I think I would acknowledge the struggles, and I think we would start completely over and pretend that it hadn't happened. I think when we tell kids that it's time for them to prove us wrong, and we challenge them to prove everybody wrong, and to really come together as a community, we can get kids invested. I think any situation like that is going to be incredibly hard, because the kids are probably feeling some sort of well, nobody sticks around. And so I think it becomes that a community piece becomes so important, and that you really have to then take time. I've written about it before, that the time we spend at the beginning of the year is some of the most important time, because it will carry into the rest of the year no matter what. And that beginning of the year can be any time of the year. Last year, I didn't start school until November because I was on maternity leave, and although they'd only had 1 sub who was very good, it was a very different experience coming into kids that already knew how to do 5th grade, but that didn't know how to do 5th grade the way I wanted them to know how to do 5th grade. And so we did start all over. Even though the curriculum calendar was turning and there was so much to do, we really said, we need to get to know each other, and we need to figure each other out and figure out who we are as a community. And it was hard for the kids at first, because of course they'd go, well, our sub said this is how it was, and so we kind of broke that together, and it turned out to be an incredible year. But I remember thinking those first couple of weeks, how are we going to come together as a community? How is this going to end up? And so I think acknowledging is huge as that too, particularly if it's a class where you come in, which happens, where they have that reputation as that class.
Right.
Then acknowledging that they have that reputation and asking the kids how they feel about it, and then saying, what can we do to turn it around?
Beginning of the year can happen any time of the year.
Yes, it can.
That's so true. That's so true. I like that it was successful for you that year.
Well, it was a great year. And I think that even, for new students, we're a school where we get a lot of new students throughout the year. And I think somehow celebrating their arrival as well and making sure that they get included in part of the community, I think, can be huge too, because often we're under so much pressure to get things done that it's almost like a high and a, here you go, here's your stuff, jump on in, rather than kind of stopping the time and saying, we're going to really welcome you, and here's some of the things that these kids already know how to do, but you don't, and making that child feel part of the community right away. even though it's hard. It's hard to stop the learning wheels once they're rolling.
Right. So, do you have a favorite quote that has inspired you as a teacher?
Well, I have two, and the first one is one that I've used a lot, and that hangs above my door, and it's the "You Matter" quote via Angela Myers, and it's something that we talk about as kids, my kids, with my kids, why they matter, how school matters, how everything matters, and it's something that I live by. Mm-hmm. And then the other one comes from the book Wonder, and it's simply choose kind, and we talk about that in my classroom a lot, about we can choose to be right or we can choose to be kind. And I think about that as a teacher and as an adult as well. Am I kind to the people around me? Do I give them the credit they deserve? Do I give them the compliments they deserve? Do I support them or do I fight them every step of the way? Not everybody teaches the way I teach, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a huge message to send out to the world. Yes, I blog, but one of my friends a couple of years ago told me that maybe if I was a little bit kinder in my approach, more people would listen. And I can't thank him enough for that advice, because it's so true. Mm-hmm. We don't get people to change by hitting them over the head with it. We get them to change by showing them the possibilities and then being nice about it. So choose kind is something both within my classroom but also outside of it.
Wow, that is so relevant for my students. I have 8th graders, and like I said, choose right or choose to be kind. Yeah. My 8th graders don't know how to be kind. Yeah. Well, not all of them, but yeah. A lot of them choose, I'm going to be right, and I don't care what anybody else says, but choose to be kind, even if you are right. Yeah. Choose to be kind. That is a powerful quote. So, if you could sit down with a new teacher just starting out in their career, and you only had time for one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
To trust your students.
That's awesome.
And your team. My team is incredible, and I wouldn't be the teacher I was without them, but to trust your students, to give them a voice, to give them back the classroom, to make them a part of their classroom. Even if they're little kids have opinions too. Little kids know what they want to do, and little kids have ideas. And even big kids who we tend to think are just crazy or stubborn or don't quite know what they need, listen to them and make them a part of the room. So trust your students, I think, is huge for me.
That's awesome. So what's happening now in your life that you're excited about? I know you have a book coming out.
I do. I was incredibly fortunate to be allowed to write a book by Powerful Learning Press, and it's coming out this fall. And it's basically a how-to book, how to change your classroom. It's called Passionate Learners, Giving Our Classroom Back to Our Students, starting today. And it's really just ideas, and little ideas and big ideas for how to give the classroom back to your students, how to really find the passion within yourself and within your students. And it's meant to be really simple things that you can change right away. And then there's big ideas too. But it's meant to be a book where you can say, I'm going to take this and change this because that works for me, and then maybe later I'll try all these things. And it's been a blast writing it, because I keep trying to say, just think of, okay, how can I word this in an easy way where it's not a huge philosophical approach or a huge program that you have to buy into, but really just like, hey, have you tried this?
Right.
Or here's this idea. And so I'm excited about that. It's being edited. And then, of course, the Global Read Aloud kicks off on Monday, which we're very excited about. And then I have 27 incredible students that I get to walk into every single day who are so eager to share their life with me and with the world. We just started blogging last week, and they have just been blowing my mind with their blog posts and what they want to share with the world and what they want to do and how they want to change the world. So I have that going, and then, of course, I have my incredible family, and I'm kind of a sucker for my family, and my husband is my soulmate. We have 3 kids, and we have a 4th one on the way, and wow. You know what? Life is good. There's a lot of great stuff going on.
Well, Pernille, your passion and your care for your kids is evident in what you say and what you do, and you have a way of connecting with kids, and that I wish I could bottle and just sprinkle around, the coffee cups of some of our new teachers out there, and hopefully that this podcast will do a little bit to spread your message to them. So, anything else you want to share before we say goodbye?
Just thank you for doing this for new teachers. I think now is an exciting time to be a new teacher. It's come a long way in the 6 years that I've been teaching, and I wish I'd had people like you to reach out to when I started. So I think what you're doing is really incredible, and just connect and get those new teachers connected. They're not alone. They're not alone with their crazy ideas or with their doubts or with their dreams. And so, yeah, so thank you for what you're doing, Sam. I think that's great.
Well, thank you. That means so much for now. So if people want to say thank you for sharing all your amazing insights, where can they find you?
Well, I think the easiest way is to Google me. A lot of stuff comes up. Twitter, it's just my name, Pernille Ripp. Obviously my blog, which is also pernilleripp.com. You can email me. I'm pretty good about answering my email. I will get to it. It just depends on whether I'm teaching at the moment. But reach out. I'm here to help. I'm here to connect. I'm here to support. And even if I don't have an answer or an idea, we can at least laugh about it together and try to solve things together. So definitely reach out. I'm reachable.
Pernille, thank you. It's been a pleasure again talking with you and finally getting to meet you.
Yeah.
I've been following you for a while, so it really is a pleasure to meet you. And actually, your insight has been, and what you shared has been very valuable. I know that the listeners will find great value in what you shared with us today. So to the listeners, I know you received a lot of great information on this episode. Now it's up to you to take it back to your classroom and implement what you learned today. So until next time,
be amazing.
The Amazing Teacher Podcast is brought to you by SuccessInTheClassroom.com. Learn more about being an amazing teacher by visiting SuccessInTheClassroom.com or TheAmazingTeacher.com.